Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. Welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am wrapping up my reading for the month of June. Overall, a very successful reading month. I've finished 11 books in June, and my total, which I don't think you can, maybe you can see. No, you cannot see. Right up here is 36 books I'm up to so far this year, so I'm going really, really well towards my overall reading goal, very much ahead of schedule, and yeah, having read quite a diverse sort of lot of books, and now that I'm looking at it, almost all of them, all except the one I don't have a physical copy of, written by women. How about that? Not intentional, but there we go. Alright, so let's get straight into, let's start off actually with a little disappointment so that we can then move on to books that I finished and read. So we're going to start with some DNFs. I DNF'd 2 books this month. One of them was this one that I had been looking forward to and was reading because of the disability readathon. So it's one that I was interested in, and this is Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah, Lakshmi, Piepzna-Samarasinha. This is a book about the disability justice movement, and it's something of a memoir, I suppose, written by this author who is an activist in that space. The reason that I DNF'd it, and I couldn't tell you how many pages into it I got, but I have flags up to page 85, so we'll see. It was probably a little bit beyond that, but about 85 pages in, and I was just really not getting along with the writing style of this one at all. There was a lot of repetition of identity wording, like a lot, and yeah, particularly things like disabled QT BIPOC creators, etc. Like, it just would just like, even if you just look at this page, you can see that it comes up like multiple times, and it's not so much that it's talking about it, it's the repetition that was bothering me. Like, it was very repetitive, and then the other thing that bothered me about it was sort of there's not a lot of kind of practical stuff in this at all. Like, it is very much a memoir essentially. It's described as a collection of essays, and it didn't really hang together for me at all, and I didn't like the style, and I was just not getting along with it, so I decided to cut my losses and to DNF this one, which was disappointing. The other one that I disappointingly DNF'd was one of the books that I spun from. If you watched my Guardian 100 Best Books video, I did a spinner where so I have had 24, now 25, which I'll update you a bit more about that at the end. Books that I had owned a copy of but hadn't yet read from that list. So I decided to make myself a spinner and to try and start moving my way through these books that people have deemed to be the best. And one of them was this book. This was one of the 2 books that I got in the spinner when I used the spinner at the end of that video. And I read the first chapter of this, and I was struggling. And the reason I was struggling is because it is written in dialect. And I really struggle when things are written in dialect. If it's just every now and again, I can probably deal with it. But it's a lot of dialogue in this book. And I flicked through and I could see that it was just basically wall-to-wall dialogue. And it felt like I was learning to read while I was reading it, and I struggled with that. So I'm calling this a soft DNF for now. It's not that I wasn't getting along with the story, it was that I was really, really struggling to read it because of the dialect. And so what I think I will do, I've left it on the spinner. If it comes back up again, I'm going to have a go at it as an audiobook. But for now, I'm soft DNFing this after a chapter. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. So yeah, unfortunately, I really, really, really struggled with that one. Okay, so those were the 2 DNFs for this month. Let's get on to the books that I actually finished. The first book that I finished is Armistice by Carol Ann Duffy, a laureate's choice of poems of war and peace. So this was published in 2018. Is that correct? Yeah, 2018, which was 100 years after the Armistice of 1918. So these were poems selected. Some of them were commissioned for it, and others were just selected from already published poems, all about war and peace. This was, as all poetry collections are, I inevitably give them 3 stars. Like this is no exception. It was a 3-star read because it's always a mixed bag as to whether I'm going to get along with or not get along with the poetry, because poetry is such a subjective thing. So when you have a kind of anthology of poems, inevitably that's what's going to happen. So yeah, there were some really great ones, and it skewed to ones that were about peace or like the aftermath of war. They were like anti-war poems, I guess, or like just sort of talking about the realities of war. But yeah, I've lost my, it's fallen down, that's okay. Yeah, this was just okay for me. So 3 stars, but it was fine. If you've got a copy of it, I would say read it. It wasn't a super long read. There's not heaps of poems in it, but it's, yeah, otherwise relatively readable. And as you can see, I have tabbed some of the poems, so it wasn't like there was nothing in there. It was just mixed. The next book that I read was Fireweather by Miranda Darling. This is a book that was shortlisted for the Stella Prize this year, and I was reading it because I was reading through all of the shortlisted books. This one I was finding some otherwise okay, but I found 4 grammatical errors in this book, like in this published book, which really pulled me out of the story each time, because as I'm reading it, I'm like having to reread the sentence and then realizing that there's an error in the sentence. So that really, I really didn't like that. And I was already working quite hard to stay in this story because it's got quite an experimental structure. So in this book we're following, and this is book 2 in a series as well, we're following a character called Winona Dalloway, which the first book that has this character is called Thunderhead, that I read last month, and you can go back to my April reviews if you would like to see my thoughts on that one. But this one, we continue to follow her. It's the first book is very loosely inspired by Mrs. Dalloway, in that it's sort of like you're in the character's head and you're kind of following them through the space of one day. And except that in Mrs. Dalloway you jump between characters. In this one you just stay in this Winona's head. But essentially I can't tell you what this book is about because it is a spoiler for Thunderhead, how Thunderhead rolls out. But the story kind of continues here, and we are inside her head, and things are not great for her. So it's not entirely pleasant to be in her head, because her life is pretty chaotic, and lots of not good things that she doesn't have any control over are happening in her life. Yeah, anyway. It was interesting to explore her inner workings and to kind of get to know her a little bit more. And I think the place that we get left at the end of this story was good. And I was compelled enough to see it through, but it wasn't a favourite. So I gave it 3.5 stars. I just find it unacceptable that there's 4, and that's just the ones that I noted. But there were 4 errors in this published book. Like, that should not be happening. What's happening? What is going on? Okay. The next book that I finished was My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. Some of you may remember a few months back I hauled a couple of other books in this series, but I hadn't yet read this one, and then I was like, should I hold on to these? Is it am I going to get along with it? A few people in the comments were like, give it a try. So I dug out what it turns out I did already have a copy of this first one. My Name is Lucy Barton. So I dug it out and I read it and I quite enjoyed it. So I really quite liked the character of Lucy. And I really also liked the kind of spare manner of the storytelling here in the book. There's a lot of pain conveyed in this story. We're following a woman, and we're kind of jumping between timelines a little bit because she is somebody who she's in hospital, or she's telling about a time that she was in hospital, and that her mother, who she was sort of estranged from to some degree, came to stay with her for a couple of days while she was in the hospital, and kind of it's kind of about their relationship, and it's kind of about her childhood, and it's kind of about her relationship with her family, like her husband and children. Yeah, it's interesting. So we're kind of jumping around. I would say this is very much a character-driven, vibes-driven book as opposed to a plot-driven book. There's not a lot of plot going on in this book, but I do quite like that style. But if you're a plot person, you won't like this, so I wouldn't go for it. But yeah, there's a lot of pain conveyed. But it's done very gently and lightly, so I really appreciated that too. I thought it was very beautifully done. And I think I will continue on with the series. I've borrowed the second one from the library because I don't have a copy of that one myself. And then I've got O. William, which I think is the third one. And then I've also got book 5. But it turns out my library also has book 4, so that's very helpful. I will have access to the full series should I choose to continue along with it. But yeah, happy that I read this one and enjoyed it. So thank you very much to those people that told me that they thought I would get along with it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next book I don't have a copy of, and that is In the Name of the Father and of the Son by Immanuel Mifsud, translated by Albert Gatt. This was a very, very short book that I read for my Round the World book club. I believe for Malta was the country that we were reading from. I haven't written that in my notes, but I'm pretty sure that's the country. But this was a really poignant, poetically told reflection on the relationship between the author and his father, which was prompted by the reading of his father's journal that he kept during World War II. The relationship was quite complicated. So his father was quite a hard, stern kind of character. And so he sort of has a kind of mixed memory about his father, and feeling about that relationship. But in that sort of way that death makes you look back with love and not necessarily with rose-tinted glasses, but to choose to remember the good things. That's sort of where this book is. So this author finds himself seeing aspects of his father in himself as a father to his own son. So that, yeah, it was really interesting. I enjoyed reading it and I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read on audiobook, but I loved it so much that I decided to buy myself a copy, and that is Heart the Lover by Lily King. So I will at some point revisit this one and read it in paperback format. But I read this one originally as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Rebecca Lowman. It took me a little bit to get into the story, which I think might have been to do with the audiobook format more so than the beginning of the story. I think if I was reading it with my eyes, it would have felt a little bit different. But it took me a little bit to get into it. But then when I guess because I just didn't know where it was going, but then when it sort of, I realized that this sort of, the relationship that's kind of being focused on at the beginning isn't necessarily the one that's going to, it's a little bit of a spoiler, isn't necessarily the one that's the focus of the whole book. And we then find out the relationship that's going to be the focus of the whole book. Then I was all in. As soon as I realized that, I was in. And the evolution of that love through to the conclusion was very complicated, but felt very, like, honest and true. So yeah, I absolutely adored this book. We start off in, like, university, and then through into an older age. Not super old, not like elderly, but like older. And yeah, I really loved the kind of the reflections about the relationship, and also just relationships in general, and like the messiness of life. This was really beautiful. I loved it. 4.5 stars. It was great. Really, really great. Highly recommend. And I'm glad that I now have a copy of it as well. Okay, let's flip the page in the reading journal and move on to our next book. Another one that I read on audiobook but also had a physical copy of, so that's what I'm going to hold up, and that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a book that I was reading for the Disability Readathon because it is written by an autistic author, and we have an autistic main character in this book as well. Although she doesn't necessarily know that at the beginning of the book. But yeah, this is actually the third book in a series. I haven't read books 1 and 2. I own book 1, but I picked this one up. And then by the time I realised it was book 3, I was like, I'm already in. Let's see. I actually don't think it's a problem. You do... so Eve Brown is one of 3 sisters, and the previous 2 books are following her 2 sisters. And they do make an appearance in this book with their respective partners, who are the focus of that relationship, is the focus of those other 2 books, I presume. But this one, we are following Eve, and she's a little bit chaotic, and she has kind of grown up very privileged, and so she has, and that has kind of like given her the space to just kind of do her own path and not really kind of commit to things. And at the very beginning of this book, she's being kind of forced into, like, her parents are like, we're cutting you off. You're not gonna be continuing to get an allowance from us. You need to, like, commit to a job and, like, actually, you know, see something through. And she's like, yeah, sure, fine. That bit of the book I didn't love. Because she was a little, not bratty exactly, but like, the character was kind of, I don't know, the privileged life. I don't get along with characters that kind of come across as like leaning into their privilege, I guess. So yeah, that was not my favorite part of the book. But then we kind of, once she kind of goes on her journey and she starts to kind of like work out what she wants to do with her life and falls into a job and a relationship, essentially, yeah, there were definitely some very like unbelievable moments of this book, but it was so fun. There was a really fun romance. I really loved the character in the end, and I enjoyed her romantic partner as well, the romantic interest, I should say. And there were some moments that I like literally was laughing, like out loud laughing at this book, and also some moments where I was crying. So yeah, like even though it was there were some moments in the book that you just had to kind of like suspend your disbelief a little bit. Yeah, it was kind of... It was worth it. The writing was good, so it was worth it. The only real minus I had written down here was that the miscommunication trope plays a little bit of a part in this one. It was in the context of high masking autism. So it actually was relevant to the story that there was a miscommunication because of the disability involved. So I can forgive it a little bit, I guess. But I didn't love that either. But it was relevant to the storyline and character growth about the miscommunication and about like not saying what you need and want because you're worried about how you're going to be perceived. So I thought it was relevant, even though it wasn't my favourite because I hate that trope. But anyway, I really had a good time with this one. I gave it 4 stars and I would recommend it. Okay, the next book that I read was another brilliant book, and that is Always Home, Always Homesick by Hannah Kent. I actually started this one after Christmas last year with a library copy. No, it wasn't a physical copy. It was a library ebook. And then my loan ran out, but the wait list was just ridiculous. And I was enjoying it when I started it. So I eventually decided to buy myself a copy of it. And I picked it up pretty quickly after purchase. I'm pretty sure this came in April and I read it almost immediately. So this was, I've written here, bloody lovely. I really enjoyed this so much. I learnt a lot about Iceland. I need to stop like jiggling the books around because that can't be good visually on the video. So I'm going to try and hold it a little bit more steady. So I learnt a lot about Iceland and I really appreciated Hannah Kent's perspective and her relaying of the way that she falls in love with this country. Like that was sort of, I think, the main thing that drew me in. But then also part of this memoir, so she's kind of initially talking about her time as an exchange student where she went to Iceland for, I think it was for a year, and they sent her to like a really quite like not into a major city, but it was like a more remote part of Iceland, and so she's sort of starts out being quite lonely, but then kind of finds her tribe and begins to like really flourish. Anyway, we are following this kind of up to almost the present day, but she also has written a novel about something that kind of captured her imagination while she was in Iceland as a teenager, and that was finding out about the last, I don't know if it was the last person, but it was maybe the last woman to be to have the death penalty in Iceland, and this was some time ago, and she just sort of really gets swept up in learning about this woman and what her life might have been like and what might have led her to where she ended up committing a crime and then ultimately being executed for that crime. And this is kind of like, this memoir is talking about the research and the writing of that book. I actually haven't read the book, but I really want to. It's called Burial Rites. It was, I think, her first novel that she wrote, and I'm really, really keen to read it. I've just realised I have a very little amount of space left on my camera, so I'm going to have to speed through the last couple of books, but I loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was brilliant. I highly recommend, and now I really want to read Burial Rites. Okay, apologies if the light has changed or the angle of the camera has changed. I ran out of space and also battery on my camera. Great planning on my part, but I'm going to resume telling you about the books that I read this month. Let's continue on. I had already filmed this bit, but I'm going to refilm it because I rushed, and I don't want to rush. I want to make sure that I give you my full review. So, the next book that I read in the month of May was Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit by Jen Campbell. This is a poetry collection, and it is a book that I read for the Disability Readathon. It's not one that I mentioned in my Disability Readathon TBR video that I made because I forgot that I had it. I forgot to check the poetry section of my collection. So I was doing a bit of a tidy up looking for specific things in my poetry collection and went, oh, that's right, I've got this. So I pulled it out and decided to read it. It's a very, very slim volume, but it is written by BookTube's very own Jen Campbell. And it is a collection that hangs together very well, where she is exploring her childhood in and out of hospital due to her disabilities, as well as her adult experience of IVF as a disabled mother. There were some harrowing excerpts of medical notes from her childhood operations, which are kind of peppered throughout the book. And I just overall found this to be a very moving collection. I highly recommend, gave it 4 stars. It was really excellent. Okay, the next book that I read as part of the brand new book club that I joined as part of my union. So the union, the teachers' union in New South Wales, decided to hold a book club, and the first book that they picked was one that I had a copy of. So I was like, sure, I can read that now. And that is How to Suppress Women's Writing by Joanna Russ. It was not a huge turnout for the first one, but hopefully it'll grow over time. This was really, really interesting. It was originally published back in the 80s. I think it was 1983, if memory serves. But this is a reissued copy, and it came out... Yeah, so 1983 was first written. This edition was published in 2018 by the University of Texas Press and includes a foreword by Jessa Crispin. This was a really interesting read because basically what Joanna Russ is doing is like a deep dive into her work essentially as a literature academic, and she is kind of examining, basically why we read what we read, who has a say in what the classics are, and what's good literature or not, who gets a seat at the table. And essentially this really, to me, was sort of like in the tradition of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I think she really lays out a case for the multiple ways that patriarchy and its child, the literary establishment, create the conditions least conducive for women to write, and then have the gall to tell us that women can't write. Insert eye roll here is what I've written in my notes. I really appreciated the clear argument. There was a little bit of repetition in here, but, I think it was for the purpose of building a case and, reviewing what we've already learnt so far, because it is very much like it does definitely build. But yeah, the clear arguments, multiple examples laid out very clearly in the book. Yeah, some of the references by their nature are out of date because if this was originally written in 1983, so it is quite old. But and also I found it to be a little bit USA-centric at times as well. But this was otherwise a very enlightening read, and I recommend it. I thought it was really good. I gave it, I think, 4 stars? Yeah, 4 stars. Then... turning the page of my notes. The next book that I read was Discipline by Randa Abdel Fattah. This book has been longlisted for the Miles Franklin Literary Award this year. It's one that I had been interested in. I've been kind of eyeing it off, and it's been on my wish list for a little while. So when it was nominated, I was like, well, now's the time. Went and bought myself a copy from my local bookstore and immediately fell in love with this book. I thought it was really excellent. What a book is what I've written in my notes. Incredibly readable and accessible, yet also incisive and no holds barred. So we follow in this book 2 characters. One is Hannah, who is works in the media. She's a journalist, and she is of Palestinian origin, but she's living in Australia. She's an Australian Palestinian. And we also follow Ashraf. Is he the one? Yeah, Ashraf is the other main character. So they're the 2 heads that we're inside, and we kind of alternate between them. Ashraf is a Muslim Australian, not Palestinian. I can't remember what his background is, but he's an academic working in like Arabic studies or something, like Arabic literature, maybe Arabic studies. No, Arabic studies in a particular university. And the kind of central thing that happens in this book, sort of the catalyst event, is that a student who is 18 years old, so technically an adult but still a school student, attends a protest at the university where Ashraf works, and he is protesting along with a group of other people who are older than him, but he is there in his capacity as an adult. He is protesting the links between the university and an Israeli a company that I think is somehow has other links to, like, more direct links to maybe like arms or like technology that is being used by the IDF, something along those lines. A company who is more directly involved in supporting Israel in its genocide in Gaza. So he attends this protest, and he is carrying a flag that is perceived to be in support of Hamas, and he says something that is perceived to be in support of Hamas. And so he gets arrested, and then it's kind of like the fallout of that. That's the catalyst event of what happens. It's about public opinion. It's about what it's like to be an Arab Australian in that context. It's about being a Palestinian person in the media, and like the hoops that you contort yourself through to continue to have a seat at the table while also like very directly confronting racism and displays of like I don't know what the technical term for it would be, but like people who are making decisions about how involved you can or can't be in particular things based on, you know, your involvement or your not involvement, but like how close you are to the subject. And it's really fascinating. I really loved the characters that she created, how nuanced their opinions were about things. This is not like everybody in this book thinks the same thing and they're just saying it in different ways. No, they don't. The approaches that Ashraf and Hannah take to things are in many ways polar opposites. So yeah, it's really, really fascinating, and I absolutely adored it. I gave it 5 stars. This was an excellent, excellent book. Highly, highly recommend. And yeah, if you are able to get yourself a copy of this one, I would recommend doing that. Like, I know that I've heard from some friends in Europe that it is getting a European release in a couple of months. So once that happens, if you're in that part of the world, highly encourage you to get a copy of it. This is really, really excellent and well written, very readable. It like has pace to it, so like you're not like, it's got plot as well as character. Like I would say it's character forward, but it's definitely also is a plotty book. So there's stuff going on all the time, and you're kind of responding with them as they kind of go through as the situation unfolds and evolves, and involves them in different ways in what is happening. And it's kind of like where you land on things, and how you have to constantly be reevaluating things. It was excellent. Highly, highly recommend. All right. The last book that I read was actually the other book that I spun when I was doing my, if you watched my Guardian Top 100 Books of All Time video, I did a spinner because I'm reading through, as I mentioned before, and I spun 2 books. One was the one that I DNF'd earlier in the video, and the other one was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This is a book that won the Man Booker International Prize in 2016. I've had this copy for a couple of years now. It's been sitting on my shelves, and it was really, really unexpected. I'd heard good things, but I think, a little bit intimidated by the fact that it had a horror tag, and I'm not a massive horror reader, though there have been some horror books that I have quite enjoyed, and this definitely falls into the category of those other books as well, where it's not like in your face scary horror. It's like psychological for the most part, like a psychological horror, but not like it's like in a insidious everyday kind of horror. Instead of being like a, scary clown kind of horror. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of thing. There is a little bit of gore in here. Like there's a lot of blood. So like if you're not someone who can read about blood, then avoid. But hi, I know it's not dinner time yet. Soon. Actually, it kind of is dinner time. Shh. No. It's kind of like the unsettling kind of horror, I would say, mostly. I thought it was really interesting that the central character in this book, I think, I'm not entirely sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's Yong-hee, isn't actually given a voice. We only hear about her from the perspectives of other people. So essentially, the first person that we hear from is her husband. And at the very beginning of the book, she is compelled, decides, but is really internally compelled to become a vegetarian, which in the culture is not something that a lot of people do. It's like there are people who do it, but it's not super common, not like it is in other parts of the world. So, the husband is a real piece of work, is a kind way to put it. And he is like very concerned about how it affects him, as opposed to having any kind of thought or care about his wife. And it becomes very clear he doesn't really think of her other than how she serves him and his life. So yeah, like he's a real piece of work, as I said. So we hear from him first, then we hear from the brother-in-law, which when it changed to that perspective, I was like, what's going on here? And then it took me a little while to realize, oh, this is the brother-in-law. Okay, so then we hear from the brother-in-law, and then we hear from her sister in the final part. So it's 3 parts. And I think this deals a lot with questions about caring for people, about bodily autonomy. That's what sort of came up for me in this book, like, and the decisions that we can and can't make about our own bodies and what we do. So I am a vegetarian, so like there was an element in this of I mean, certainly her experience was not my experience, but it really, to me, it's such a like, oh, this was my decision. It's a bit inconvenient for other people at times, but like it's not, I don't have a lot of people in my life who are like making my life actively difficult for that decision. Whereas like the people in her life are just like, no, like you can't do this. Like it's not the done thing. So yeah, like it was very interesting from that perspective for me. And the ending, I think, is very deliberately ambiguous. Like, we don't really ever get an easy path through this. Like, we're sort of, because we're hearing from these, like, unreliable narrators, essentially, because we don't really know what's going on for the main character. We're never given that path through the book, and I think it's deliberately ambiguous at the end for that reason. The only thing that's very easy is to hate the husband with absolute hatred. From, like, I'll read you the first line, because, like, immediately I was like, oh, this guy's a jerk. Before my wife turned vegetarian, I'd always thought of her as completely unremarkable in every way. I was like, To be frank, the first time I met her, I wasn't even attracted to her. Okay, initial, like, automatically, like, this guy's a douchebag. Anyway, I really got along with this book quite well. It was 4.5 stars for me. Absolutely fabulous. The only reason it's not 5 stars, I think, is because occasionally the word choices were like, I had to look words up in the dictionary, and I was like, that was unnecessary vocab to put. Anyway, I don't like that sort of thing. I think it's like being deliberately highfalutin, and I'm not here for it. Okay, so that's the end of all of the books that I read in May, but I'm ready to spin my wheel again, so I'm going to do that for you now. So let me I've taken the vegetarian off. I've left Their Eyes Were Watching God on. So we're going to do 2 spins. War and Peace. Oh my God. War and Peace is spin number 1. Okay, let's spin again. Remember, we do 2 spins. Oh my God, not another chunker, not another chunker. Beloved. Okay, so we have War and Peace and we have Beloved. So I will choose from one of those 2. Oh my God. Can I do War? I'm looking at War and Peace because I've moved all of the books onto my shelf that's just over here. War and Peace is so chunky. Beloved is right next to it, actually. And it's much less chunky. I have a feeling that it will be Beloved that we have a go at, but we'll see. And I will report back once I have read at least one of those 2 books, and we will get ready to spin again once that happens. Make sure you comment down below if you've read any of the books I've been reading and you want to chat about your thoughts, or if you are interested in any of the books that I've talked about today and want to ask me more questions about it, please feel free to pop those down into the comments. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.